Next, I'd like to welcome up our first speaker of the day. Tomi is a Nigerian, British, Canadian, American UX professional with a social science background. Since attending a bootcamp for UX design and research in 2017, Tomi has worked at a fast-paced agency in-house at one of the big three educational publishers, and she now works as a digital government consultant on a project for the Veterans Health Administration. Welcome, Tomi.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. So I'm Tomi, and just a little bit about me. I am based in Chicago, and I'm a UX researcher and designer at Skylight Digital. Besides just trying to keep it together and watching a lot of Netflix this year, just like everybody else, I've also picked up tap dancing, and it's super fun. Highly recommend it. And I'm sure my downstairs neighbors love that. I'm also forever trying to figure out how not to kill all of my plants. Today, here's a little breakdown of what I hope to talk to you all about. First, I'll get into a little bit about my background, my schooling. We'll get into what UX research is, what it means to me, what it means in my own words. And then, like Ryan said, I'll talk about my agency experience, my in-house experience, and then now my consultancy experience. And then finally, I'll just get into what my day-to-day looks like, and hopefully have time at the end for Q&A in case there's anything else you all would like me to talk about. So first, a little about my background. I do not have a design degree, and actually my journey to UX has been pretty windy. In college, I changed my major like 3 times and eventually landed on comparative human development, where I focused a lot on child and adolescent psychology. And all throughout high school, all throughout college, I tutored kids. I loved working with students, loved working with teachers. And after college, I still wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do when I grew up, but I knew I liked working in education. So I stayed close to home for a few years. And some of the jobs I had in my senior year of college, I was a research assistant for the Teachers Union. After graduating, I was a teacher's assistant at a Montessori school for a little bit. And I also taught hands-on engineering projects to kids with a nonprofit. And I even worked at an education and employment discrimination law firm for a bit. And it was actually while I was teaching, I was subscribed to a bunch of ed tech blogs, and I kept seeing UX pop up like all over the place. I was like, okay, what is that? Looked it up, and it seemed like a really good marriage between my background in psychology and my interest in tech. So I talked to a bunch of designers. I went to meetups, asked people to grab coffee with me and just tell me about their jobs, and finally decided it looked like a good next step for me. So then I attended in 2017 a boot camp, and it was about 6 months long. And that is where I learned UX research and design. But over the years, I've just realized that UX research is where I feel the most comfortable. I feel it's where I shine, and I've sort of gravitated more towards research over the years. And I think that's also because even before switching to UX, I had experience interviewing people, getting them to talk about themselves, tell me how they think. And I also had experience conducting research. So UX research didn't feel like a drastic shift for me, even though it was a different framework. So when I say UX research, what do I really mean by that? For me, something that comes to mind, you're not your user. This has become basically a mantra in our industry, this idea that we can tend to overestimate how many people will think like us or act like us in a given context. So when we're designing products, we can falsely make assumptions about what's going to work for the people using our products. And I think we can mitigate this by actually talking to them throughout the life cycle of the product, just to make sure we're not wasting time and money making things that the people they're intended to help it doesn't actually meet their needs. So this is a humbling reality that I like to keep in mind, and I think it justifies frequently doing UX research. So how I would define it in my own words is talking to people to learn about their needs, their motivations, and their behaviors so that we can design better products and experiences for them. So really that means to me learning about people's mental models. So how do they think things work? What do they call things? Like what's the language that they're using? What are some of the assumptions and belief that they bring with them that informs how they engage with a product or a service. To learn about their needs and motivations, I'm wondering why are they even here? What are they trying to do? What are some of their goals when using this product or this service? And then for their behavior, I'm looking at so what do they actually do? Where are they clicking? What are they buying? And this research is also that we can do a better job of just meeting people where they are so that, let's say they're on a website, language that we're using for a heading or a button makes sense to them, makes sense, matches how they think, or make it so that if they're trying to find something, they're not spending too much time. And that can be frustrating if we haven't studied where they might look or what kind of language they might be looking for. So some of the questions that I ask myself when doing research are, so what do people say? What do people do? Whether I'm bringing ideas to them that the team has, or I'm just watching them and having them talk me through their experience with the website. I'm curious what they think, what they care about, maybe what's working for them, things that aren't working for them, things that are frustrating. If there's anything they wish was different, and most importantly, why? And then during something like usability testing, I also get to see what they do, how they interact with the page, which areas of the page they're focusing on, and which other areas maybe they gloss over or they don't even discover at all. I'm also interested in, let's say we're considering a new feature. Before I even think about like, okay, how can we best make this feature? I'm wondering, do we even need this feature? What value does it offer to the people who are using our products? And then honestly, a lot of the work is damage control. If someone is frustrated, let's say they can't really find something, they can't really accomplish the task they set out to do, what can we do to fix it so that other people don't really stumble into those same kind of issues, and how can we make it better? And then to answer some of these questions, here are some of the activities and exercises that I do. So the bulk of my job is interviewing people just to get a sense of where we should focus our efforts, to see if something that we've created is really meeting their needs. I can, for concept testing, I'll get a sense of before we spend a lot of time building or designing something, are we headed in the right direction? Let's see, just test this concept. For card sorting, I might do a card exercise with someone to see what pieces of information they feel belongs on a page, how they would naturally group that information. And then a lot of my work is reviewing designs. I work closely with designers to make sure we're following best practices, to make sure that we're following and paying attention to things we've already learned in research and making recommendations based off of all of that. Let's say we are trying to work on a new feature. I might do something like a comparative analysis to see what this looks like normally, how other people have tackled similar problems. And then, of course, I also do usability testing, especially before launching major changes. We'll want to make sure that people can find their way around and complete the tasks that they set out to do. Um, and I also do copywriting. I share this responsibility with a few other people on my team, including designers and other researchers. So now I'd like to get into my different experiences working in an agency, in-house, and at a consultancy. So right after my boot camp, my first job was at Vocal. They're an agency. There were about 40 employees there. So their clients hired us to design and build products. And while I was there, I worked on a few different projects, and they totaled maybe like a few weeks long to as long as a few months long. Then after that, I worked at McGraw-Hill, and they're a much larger company, over 3,000 employees across multiple different offices. And there we created our own products in-house, and they were educational products, so our online learning platforms, textbooks. And now I work at Skylight, and they're also about 40 employees, similar to an agency in that clients hire us to design things, to build things, but I'm embedded on a team. It's a longer term contract, and we're more involved in coming up with the strategy and the direction of the website. And the project I'm on, I started in February, and I will continue on through to next year. So longer term contracts for sure. A little bit more about my agency experience. So there was me, there were 2 other UX designers, a couple more visual designers, and lots of developers, and a product manager on my team. And their UX designers also did research. So I did both of those things, and most of my daily meetings or stand-ups were with everyone on my team. So if I was doing research, I frequently got feedback. I think that sort of immediacy was really helpful. Also, I worked on a few different projects across a few different industries. An example, I worked on wealth management tools. I helped a client think through what it might look like for them to have a companion app for their medical devices. It was really fast paced. It sort of felt like we had to be scrappy with research sometimes. And I think for the first time, I realized that the cadence, the process that I had learned in my boot camp, which was ideal, in the real world, sometimes it's hard to find research participants. Sometimes you realize you might not have as much time as you had wanted, and having to deal with those sort of real life constraints. So afterwards at McGraw-Hill, there, the UX team was larger. We had multiple offices, so a lot of our meetings were virtual. And that's where I started to do a bit more research and less design. I mostly worked with researchers and designers, but we met frequently with product managers and development as well, just to sort of combat the tendency towards silos and really make sure all the teams were on the same page. So there I did a lot of research with teachers and students, which felt very homey to me because of my background. And I got to get a good sense of our learning ecosystem because I did research on our science products, our social studies products, our math products. So I got to see how teachers use our products. And then beyond that, I got a better sense of their classroom environment, what other products they were using, their teaching styles, any resources they had available. So are we talking about a classroom where every kid has an iPad, or a school where teachers have to share those computer carts? Things were slower paced. I definitely got more sleep at that job. And there we had the time to really think about, okay, where do we want to be as a company 2 years from now or 5 years from now? And how can we work towards the big picture? And there was a lot more emphasis on company values and our brand. And now I work at a consultancy. So at Skylight, again, also about 40 people. My team is small. It's me, another researcher, 1 designer, 4 developers, and a product manager. So similar to the agency sort of cadence, but again, the contract I'm on is for at least for a couple years. And the designer helps us with research plans, and researchers, we sometimes come up with low fidelity designs. So there's a bit of a blending of the roles where people kind of help out where they can. And a big difference between my experience at Skylight and other jobs I've had is that I don't have a UX director or UX manager who's looking at my daily tasks, but certainly I have check-ins with Skylight research and design leads. If ever I need help with something, I can go and I can seek feedback, but it's not like someone is monitoring my day-to-day work from a UX and research perspective. And so that's a lot of responsibility, a lot of freedom, which for me was scary at first, but it has forced me to grow a lot this year. And it means I'm more involved in thinking through when the team does research, what methods we utilize, and I'm more involved in planning the roadmap for research and thinking through the big picture of our project. So now I'll specifically get into what my day-to-day looks like. Honestly, a lot like this. Luckily, I work for a team. We encourage naps, we encourage walks. I'm a very sort of a sleepy person, so I have to remember to get up from time to time. But really, here's what I do. We work in sprints, so there are 2-week periods, and we always start the first week with sprint planning. And that's where we figure out, okay, what task should everyone work on? What does success look like? Who's working on what? And it's a really good time for us to think through what we're doing, what our goals are. We can revisit the product roadmap. We can recall what is it that we learned in research, or what bug did someone stumble into that's justifying the work that we're doing for this sprint. And then I'll work closely with the other researcher. We'll sort of divvy up the responsibilities. What we found works really well is if one person goes ahead and starts writing the research plan, the other person will start recruiting and scheduling people for interviews, and then we'll join forces. We'll finish the research plan. We'll share it with the designer, with the product manager, just to make sure we're all on the same page about what it is we're trying to learn with that research effort. And then in the next week, we'll go ahead, we'll do the research, we'll do the research activities, we'll debrief, me and the researcher will debrief together. We'll figure out what is it that we need to bring back to the team, what's worth sharing, and then also what recommendations we have for things to work on next, even if it's not immediately next, long-term as well. And then the cycle will repeat. We'll help write stories, we'll help write new tasks, and that's kind of the cadence, the flow of my day to day. And yeah, that's what I have. That's what I have for you all today. I now invite questions. Thanks so much for listening. If there's anything you all want me to talk about, I'm happy to get into that. So let me pull up the platform. I think I can see Q&A questions written there. So one of the questions I see is, what's the difference between referring to users as users versus people? I feel like this is a hotly debated question, and because users, or even words like consumers, can feel very dehumanizing, even though, I mean, it's in the title of the job. It's very well recognized and understood. And so when I use people, I understand that, you can't, I don't know that I can entirely divorce myself from that language of user. It just feels more human. And especially when I'm doing research, I would never call someone a user. It's more one-on-one, more person to person. That's what it means to me. I have Googled so many times, like, what words we should use instead. Sometimes the word customer is more appropriate, but not always. Sometimes people use consumers. That's what I think about that. So let me comb through some of these others. So one of the questions I see is, in your role, do you design and survey people? I've heard of UX and UI, but I don't really know the difference. So how I've had the difference described to me in a way that really resonated was this idea of, let's say we're talking about a building, and someone has to come up with the sort of blueprint, the architecture, like, what is this even going to look like? That's what I see as in the wheelhouse of UX. Like, what is it that we're trying to build here? Where should things go? What does that skeleton really look like? Whereas a UI person might be involved in coming up with that picture, but they really come in once we've already figured out what's on the page, where things go, and now, like, that's the opportunity to apply branding, fonts, and really make it look the way you would want something to look beyond sort of a grayscale. Here's what we're doing. Here's what it all looks like. Okay, I'm going to read some other questions. Let's see. So one question I'm seeing is, what does a research plan look like for you specifically? And what might be some of the steps included in setting that plan? So for me, a research plan always starts with in that sprint planning where we're figuring out, okay, we want to talk to these people. Here's what we're trying to learn. Maybe here's the feature we're working on where we're not quite sure where to go. And we need to talk to people who would be using it to get a sense of how to build this out. So my research plan will start with a timeline of scheduling. Okay, so how many days are we giving to the research plan? When are we doing research? When are we sharing out with our stakeholders? So just like a mini timeline for me and the other researcher to keep us on task. And then we immediately identify goals. So beyond what we shared in sprint planning, where everyone kind of nods along and we're like, yeah, this is what we want to get research on, me and the other researcher will think through, okay, what are we actually trying to learn here? And then the bulk of the research plan is the script. So how do we ask questions in a way that will get us the answers that we want, that'll get us closer to understanding, okay, if we want to build out a metrics page, what should go on it? What is important to people? What do we think is important that maybe people actually don't care about? So the script, and then also we'll detail participants as the scheduling starts to be more cemented. I hope that helps with kind of how I think about research plans. And then let's see, I can take, how much more time do I have? I probably can take a couple more. How often has UX research and implementation of findings been off track with user feedback when deploying changes? So to me, that question means like, has there been a mismatch maybe at times between what changes we're trying to deploy and then what I hear back from research? Certainly there have been times when we'll sort of come up with an idea or maybe something we inherited even before I joined the team. This is just how we do things. And then I learn in research, like, maybe this thing that we created a year ago doesn't quite make sense for our ecosystem anymore. Maybe it's something that we created because we had a short timeline and we just had to get something there, but it's not the best that it can be. The more I do research, we do it so frequently that, you start to see patterns, and it allows me to really step back and think through what we created against like how I'm hearing people use it. Are there things that we thought made a lot of sense and people are like, you know what, I never go there. I never really understood what that meant. I think that luckily that doesn't happen too often. The position I'm in now, we do research a lot, and luckily that it's not often that we've spent time deploying changes that haven't been vetted various times along the way. One question that I see is, what's the most challenging part about UX research? That's a really good question. I would say one thing that's challenging that has come up for me kind of recently is this idea that the point of a UX researcher, we're supposed to kind of be this mediator between people using the products. What are they saying? How can we bring that to the people making the products so that we're all on the same page and there isn't a disconnect? And sometimes I wonder how best to relate to stakeholders. So the people, keeping my lights on, paying us all to be here, how best to think about visions that they have, ideas that they have, when I'm hearing potentially from the people using the products that like they might not care about exactly the same things. I know that everyone, like certainly our client, the stakeholders are interested in meeting the needs of the people using them, but if they're not always talking to them, then it suddenly becomes my job to sort of relay like, hey, stakeholder, hey, person paying me, I know that you really care about these things, but some of your priorities might not actually match what I'm hearing in research. And it's like, how do you finesse that language so that you're not really being offensive and you're just doing your duty of sharing, doing what they hired you to do and sharing just people's feedback without much angst behind that. I would say it's challenging, but it's challenging in a good way. And certainly when I've spoken up about like, hey, I think we're a little bit off about this, clients have appreciated that they might not have been able to learn that on their own. Let's see. One question I see is, were you able to transition quickly from the boot camp to employment? Did you have a portfolio when you first started at Vocal? Did your portfolio include boot camp projects or just your own UI and UX projects? So was I able to transition quickly? After my boot camps, they always said, you really should get your portfolio going up right away. We had a couple client projects during the boot camp, and so those were the two initial projects I had on my portfolio. But I was so burnt out after boot camp, like I didn't even open my laptop for 3 weeks. I went to Thailand. I needed that break. Then I came back, and it probably took me another 2 months to really get my portfolio up and running. And it didn't take me long to find a job. And I don't think that was very common. Like I just found my first job because I happened to be on LinkedIn. Someone posted about a job. There were already 40 comments with people saying, oh, hey, I want to apply. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to be the 41st person to comment to. And I just directly messaged that person, and he didn't talk to me for like 2 weeks. And then we had coffee, and then I got the job. And I don't know that that's typical, but I guess that it's a testament to being on LinkedIn and like checking things beyond just job boards. I think I've only ever gotten a UX job because I either had talked to someone directly at the company, or I saw something like on LinkedIn or heard about it from somewhere. I often don't get jobs when I just apply online. And then my portfolio, I think I answered that question. There were a couple things on my portfolio site, and it was just the two things, the two projects I had worked on in my boot camp where we actually worked with startup companies. And so that allowed me to really detail my process and show certain assets as well. So Liz is saying last question. Okay, so let me try to take one more. How do you gather your insights to become tasks for UX designers? That's a good question. So for my findings, me and the researcher will meet. Beyond sharing with everyone on the team, we'll also sit down with the designer, because the designer helped us come up with a lot of the research questions and goals. And so we'll sit with her and think through, based on what we heard from research, specifically what should we change in the design. And so it's just a very organic conversation about, here's what we think makes sense. Sometimes we'll have questions that aren't answered, and we'll have to go with our best guess and then do another round of research after she's designed more. But yeah, we just think through with her. Sometimes we bring in the entire team because we're scratching our heads over something. That's kind of how we turn synthesis into the next tasks for the designers. So I guess that's my last one. And thank you all so much for your questions. And thanks again to Treehouse for inviting me today.